the Vice President of Aviation Operations and Technical Services for RAA. And while we don't have a fire in the building because it's frowned upon, I would like to welcome our President and CEO, Faye Malarkey Black, who's going to do the traditional fireside chat with our new chairman of the board, Dion Flannery. So welcome to Faye. Where are you? There you are. Welcome, Faye and Dean. Dion.
Thank you, Bill.
We'll skip a seat.
All right, Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
Here we are again. We could build a little fire right here. I think that might be nice. So Dan, let's just get right to it. You've been chair for about 4 months now, and you've been a board member for about 5, 6 years, maybe even longer than that, several years. So in that time, and I think we can unmask while we're speaking here, right? In that time, you've gained an intimate view of how the association advocates on behalf of its members. And I think our airline advocacy is really well understood. We are, after all, an airline organization. We lobby for airlines. But less well understood, I think, is the shared objectives that we have with everybody in this room. So maybe that's a good place to start. Can you talk about how some of our focus has really pursued some of those broader objectives?
Sure. Well, I think about last year. I mean, it's impossible not to think about last year and what we're going through today still as a consequence of the pandemic. But in particular, being up close and personally involved in the board activities, it was, RAA played an instrumental role in effectively being a liaison to lawmakers who, many of which didn't understand or didn't support the need for payroll support in its early days. And certainly another bridge further down the road was, well, regionals, what is that? I mean, if we're talking about airline aid, maybe it was talking about aid for majors. And the RAA played a pivotal role in educating lawmakers as to the differences in our business and the imperatives that come with our business model, which is service to small communities, and the loss, the devastation that would occur if we weren't able to support our employees and we were to separate them. We would have a materially negative impact on domestic service in the United States. And again, we're all very intimately familiar with that. But it is lost on many folks, and in particular some that have an extraordinary obligation and responsibility with decision making. And then secondly, I think, again, using the pandemic as a perspective here, those early days, there was a lot of uncertainty. There's still uncertainty today, and there's dynamic and there's conflicting information. And I recall all of us working together through the various councils and committees that RAA uses to talk about how to safely protect our customers and our employees alike. And it's that continuous safety roundtable approach the RAA provides for us that gives us a free space to share ideas and to protect the industry as a whole.
That's certainly true. And in fact, that extends out not just to our board, but we work shoulder to shoulder with airport organizations and with the trade associations for the main line. So we'll be hearing from some of them later. But it really was every single member of the industry pushing together at once. And again, we heard from so many of you as well, and we felt so connected, really. That was, it's hard to say there are silver linings with something as devastating as this pandemic. But I will say that one thing that came out of it was very affirming, was just that connection with everybody in the industry broadly, and just to be able to spring into action and to use our safety panels and councils as well. So Dean, you have a particularly unique view of the relationships between regionals and main lines. You've previously overseen the regional partnership with U.S. Airways, and now you're the president of the fastest growing regional airline, one of the fastest growing regional airlines. So given that unique view, what do you think goes into a good partnership? And maybe I'm leading the witness a little bit, but why will the main lines always need regionals?
Well, I think it's start with the second question first. Mark did a fantastic job, again, highlighting the unique fit that our regional fleets provide for demand domestically in the United States. Very often our aircraft are exactly the right capacity for the job, and give the network planners at all the major carriers the opportunity to introduce new routes, to support developing markets, to fill out traffic or service patterns effectively. And just their game is one of optimization, and having more arrows in the quiver in terms of capacity allows them to do their jobs better. And so that's an important piece of it. Just the same, a network planner might look at a 50-seat or a 65-seat or 76-seat airplane just the same and just say, I just need one here at this time. And so part of the equation of being a good partner is being the one who separates yourself and saying, my 65-seater is the one that you actually need. And the reason you need it is you can rely on us for safe, incredibly reliable and consistent performance, and one that will drive the highest likelihood to recommend scores from customers. That's obviously in the partner's best interest. You look at the business today, it's changed remarkably on the regional side of the business over the last decade. Our airplanes today, by and large, have been upgauged to larger, medium, and larger size regional jets. All of PSA's fleet is equipped with 3-class service, first class, main cabin extra, and economy. Has all the amenities of in-seat power and second generation Wi-Fi. So the service gap between a mainline product domestically and the regional has effectively been eliminated over the last number of years, and providing us the opportunity to take our services and our product to all corners of the country, so to speak. As I think about today's environment between network carriers and the partners they rely on for the regional lift, I think what it constitutes the best partnership is communication and coordination. And I think particularly in this environment where schedule construction and publication and execution has been shrunk from what reasonably should be a 5 to 6 month life cycle down to something that is done, undone, and redone 4 or 5 times within 3 months. And that's incredibly difficult for an operator to catch that pitch and do it well and operate well. So it requires us to, number one, understand our constraints, know them acutely well, and to communicate those to the network carriers so that this doesn't end up in a service failure at the time of operation. And I think most in the room who've been doing this for a while would agree that level of coordination and collaboration is better now than it ever has been before, partly by necessity of the hardship of the pandemic, but more just the realization that while our business is different than the main lines, a lot of the same issues that can conspire against us as we try to deliver a safe and reliable product are the same as the main line. And so the way to properly address those is to get them in the open, to not play hide and seek, to get the bad news out early, as we say, and to work collaboratively to resolve it. And if anything else, just to avoid a guaranteed failure at the time of the schedule itself. So again, I think that while there's more opportunity for us to do more there, it's better now than it has been before. And if you go look at the performance data, regional airlines, not just through the deeply reduced schedule activity of last year, but today, during furloughs, during recall and post recall, the operating performance of the regional carriers are putting up numbers now that are unparalleled. We have some of the best on-time performance completion factor and customer service marks that we ever had in our history. So again, I think that's in a way a reflection of the effort to coordinate and collaborate.
Right. So we know that PSA is a wholly owned subsidiary of American Airlines. And of course, American Airlines is a member of the Trade Association Airlines for America. But PSA and several other wholly owned airlines are strong members and highly participating members of the RAA. So let's talk for a moment about the different types of members that we have, and why has RAA been important to PSA?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you're 100% correct. American and their participation in A4A addresses a lot of the regulatory and industry specific, passenger specific issues that the industry faces. And you could say that they sort of carry the wholly owned water in that regard. But our business is different. And in many ways, as we talked about a moment ago, making certain that folks who are in charge of regulating or legislating understand those differences and understand what role we play in the transportation industry is critically important. And no one does it better than RAA. The RAA understands specifically what our issues are, how they differ, and they can effectively communicate that with those in Washington. And so we rely heavily on the RAA to advocate on our behalf. We are a relatively broad association as well. We're not just the large network carrier regionals, but we have important role players in other aspects of the business as well, and whose interest again can differ from that of a commercial network carrier's basis. And again, we rely heavily on a very small but talented staff at RAA to make certain that our messages are getting across.
Well, I teed you right up for that. So thank you very much. We appreciate the compliment, but truly I would send it right back to you, because RAA is not just its staff, right? RAA is all of the members, and our members do really participate so strongly. They're not just making decisions at the board level, but actually going out, advocating and telling that story. We always make the remarks, we can tell you your story on Capitol Hill, and we do, but nobody tells it better than each of you. And I think we're stronger for all those differences within our organization. And you talked a little bit earlier about how we've adjusted planning. And I certainly think that is going to be very important. Mark's presentation showed the Oliver Wyman slide that gives everybody heartburn. Even though we've seen it, every time you see it, you can't help but just cringe looking at those numbers going red. And I actually also share the opinion that blue line for 2021 might have been a little bit optimistic. We've spent a lot of time talking about the pilot shortage, and typically at our events, we report out our progress. We have a dedicated panel on this later today, and we're going to hear a lot about this, I'm sure, from some of the lawmakers that are going to be joining us over the next couple of days. But, let's just go, and you're on the panel later. So for right now, let's just go big picture. We've had 18 months since we've all been together. What is some of the progress that you think we have made, at least on maybe if not resolving the issue, but educating lawmakers about the issue?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I think Mark said it right. That blue line, I think, is a mirage in 2021. We all know where we are. We also know that the pandemic, potentially was just the eye of the storm in terms of pilot workforce supply. I think the major carriers did a very admirable job of by necessity, trimming payroll through voluntary leaves, and more importantly through early retirements. And so, while that was a necessary, unfortunate but necessary step last year, it has accelerated what we already knew very, very well, which is that the demand for pilots at network and now cargo carrier expansion is outstripping supply. I think probably, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've all talked about the barriers to entry into the business and the fact that there are not enough ATP issuances per year to meet the regional demand need. One of the things that is emerging that can be a catalyst and can be helpful is addressing the fact there is no financial aid apparatus today to extend to folks who are otherwise excluded from following a career path into commercial aviation because they don't have the financial means. I think that's critically important. We think that there's a growing sense of acknowledgement, and beyond acknowledgement, there's a sense of ownership at the congressional level now. And we're hopeful to see legislation move both in the House and the Senate quickly to address that and to make available federal loans, student loans, to help people with flight training so that they can, in fact, find their way to the cockpit. There's a need to expand access without question, and that seems like a very reasonable first step to do so. We do know that it takes intellect and commitment and discipline to become a commercial pilot.
For his mic.
And yeah, tested good. We hear you. We know that those are the attributes of successful commercial pilots. The reality is there's a host of folks out there that have those traits, that have those capabilities, but lack the financial wherewithal to enter into what is today a long and expensive pathway to commercial aviation. So we're keen to see that door unlocked, and I know we're going to talk more about it today to open access to folks to this business to make way to the pilot.
Absolutely. And I think part of the reason that is so critically important is it's giving them access to the structured training. And, we focus a lot on pilot supply, rightly so. But it's my view that we also need to ensure that we're focusing on getting pilots the right kind of training, the structured training, so that it's not just welcoming more into the pipeline, but making sure that they have the skills and the training and experience to succeed in the flight deck.
That's right.
Before we get into the next element, I guess, again, I want to thank you, for your service through the RAA. You've been really tenacious in your pursuit of the greater good. And I think that that's something, I'll say it, I believe to be true about our board. I'm always impressed with the way our board functions. And, I talk to other leaders of trade associations who sometimes have a challenge with their board or getting consensus, and we just almost never do. And I think that is because to a person, we all know that we need one another. We all know that no matter, that diversity that Dion talked about earlier, we all know that this person is working with this member of Congress, that this person is doing something really important for the industry. And when we're together, we're a lot stronger as well. So as we welcome more members of the executive committee and the board here, can you reflect a little bit on the board and how it's worked together last year?
Yeah, I sure can. Again, vivid memories of working out of the home office. I don't know if it was, weekends and evenings, but the board we assembled regularly and worked closely together. I mean, competition is fierce in this business, and we are competitors. But just the same, I think there's a closeness at the board level, familiarity. We all know what it takes to make this business work and to work well. And there's a bit of martyrdom to it. It just seems to be getting harder and harder along the way. But I think that's that brings us close together and is a catalyst for action. I think we really understand the risks. We're open to one another's input. And honestly, I think over the years, we've come to rely on one another to bring those issues forward and to challenge each other with solutions. I think it's a cooperative element. Nobody's interest leapfrog anybody else's in particular. Again, we are a diverse board representing a number of different regional carriers with effectively different models. And there's an openness for all of us to work together. And again, we rely heavily on the regional airline staff and Faye in particular to make certain that we're on those issues, that we're advised, and that we're making decisions that protect the industry as a whole. And as we welcome the members, both board members and associate members, to the leaders convention here this year, I want to extend my personal thanks to all of you for all that you've done through this pandemic, through all you've done through the years, for sticking through with us. We're so glad to have you here. We appreciate your presence and your participation. On behalf of the executive board and the board as a whole, I want to extend my sincere thanks to all of you for being here. We really appreciate it.
We have 2 microphones in the audience, so if you have a question and you want to make your way up to them, that they're right there, as you can see in the center. And I have another just a question for you on the air service. Really, I mean, take us through sort of the summer and into the winter. I mean, are we back to normal, and do we even know what normal is now?
I don't know about you, but I hope this isn't normal. This is, it's better, no doubt about it. I mean, better in the sense that, many sleepless nights thinking about how we get all the, we recruit successfully and train all the employees necessary to run the future schedule. That's a challenge that never goes away. But all these aspects to the business that are changing, the work from home, the employer relationship that is changing, in so much as every aspect of it, quite frankly, and it's not a what's in it for me, but there's certainly more to be considered with respect to the employee proposition that we represent to folks that we want to join the organization. So we have to find new ways to reach people, new ways to connect. There's no question that work from home is a potential threat. While people appreciate the flexibility, and people, I think, quite frankly, are very receptive to the notion that gives them a higher quality of life. I think time will tell whether that's sustainable or not. There's undoubtedly the benefit of being, avoiding a commute, having more time with family and friends, and doing work in your own home workplace has advantages. The reality is, for the employer, that's somewhat concerning. Whether I work for a regional airline, a broomstick manufacturer, or a multi-global consulting agency, it's just me and the keyboard. And what's the alignment? What's the affiliation? And where's the camaraderie and the collaboration with teammates? That's what's at risk. And again, we need to find and solve for those solutions where we attract the best talent we can. They feel connected, they feel part of something, and they don't feel isolated or as an individual computer or a contributor working through a terminal on the end. I think those are the challenges all companies face, and certainly a logistics business like ours, which is dependent upon high levels of collaboration, communication, and preparation. You have to make certain that we are able to do that and to do it as well as we have in the past. And the last piece of this is we're a transitory workforce in the regional business. We don't begrudge the fact that many of the folks who join our organizations aspire to have a career at a major carrier one day. And we're proud when people successfully make that transition from PSA. But again, this work from home and this distributed workforce trends that we see today put a burden on us in terms of how we train and how we flatten the learning curve for all of our employees. Again, just selfishly thinking about it from my own experience, 30 years ago when I entered the industry by accident, the best thing that happened to me was being invited to meetings and being in specific conversations I had no business belonging, and essentially soaking all of that information up, whether it was learning from those who had done this for years, whether it was listening to conversations somewhat heated and pointed, but just learning all of that's at risk, quite frankly, in an isolated work from home environment. So it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on managers and the team leaders in our organization to find creative ways to establish that context, reintroduce it, and to give folks who are part of the organization and have more flexibility to work remotely what they need to stimulate them for growth and belongingness, quite frankly.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I would imagine that most of the airlines are largely back to work in person, but I mean, how many of you are still working, remotely or hybrid, or you still have a significant workforce? Well, about half, unless folks were a little bit tired and it was more. But that's surprising to me, and that we've continued to work remotely this long. And one interesting thing is it's fun to go to work. I mean, our office is still largely remote, and I'm sure it's regional, but in DC, a lot of our counterparts are still also mostly remote. And when we do have that in-person meeting, people are psyched,
Yeah. We just held a directors and above meeting about 3 weeks ago, and you could really see the excitement. Folks who hadn't been in the same room all together in the better part of 15 months or so, at least. It looked a room about the size for 35 people, so it was safe. But we celebrated it together, and I think that's going to be what we have to deal with for at least for the coming months, is to be prudent, to be careful, but to find ways to get the team to connect.
Yeah.
And do it in that type of manner.
I think it's so important too, what you mentioned before, just about being noticed and being able to be there in person and soaking things up. And we're going to talk a lot about diversifying our workforce, but let's face it, women are still really underrepresented in other underrepresented populations. We have a lot of work to do, and you've got to be noticed, right? And so I think that's something also that we've got to keep in mind, because remote is different. It's harder to manage and it's harder to be noticed. And, yet I think it is reality. I think we're going to be blending and dealing with some remote and hybrid virtual workplaces for probably the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that seems like an excellent note on which to wrap. You all didn't ask any questions, which makes me think you need coffee. So we're going to give you a 10-minute break, and then we're going to welcome up our next panel. There's coffee in the back of the room, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Thank you.